Uh, in last August, together with my colleague Gundev Gimre, I went to Qatar to investigate on the migrant laborers issue. We focused on Nepalese migrant laborers, but it was a kind of study for all of the migrant laborers who came to Qatar to work for construction and in other areas, but our focus was more on construction side because of the reason that more people were being brought to the country for the World Cup to build up the World Cup facilities. So what happened is when we went there, we went straight to Nepalese embassy in Qatar, started talking to some Nepalese workers who were trying to return after 5 days of their arrival, and that was a very interesting story for us, and we wanted to find out why they wanted to return after just 5 days of coming to the country. And that gave us very interesting insight. I'll talk about that when I was talking about the rules, why they wanted to go back. The second aspect, we went to Doha downtown on Friday when workers come to the public places, and then we could meet people in a big group. Again, there we managed to talk to many laborers there, and then some of them even volunteered to interview us. And then also we managed to go to some of the construction site. We observed the construction. We looked at the health and safety issues there. And then finally, which is very hard thing, we managed to go to the workers' accommodation site. They are known as labor camps in Qatar. I don't know how this labor camp came to be known as, but then I think this is popularly called because they are grouped together and they live in big groups. And that's the kind of area where we are trying to investigate. And coming back to the workers and their working conditions, we found many of them workers are taken from their labor camps, and then they have to get out early in the morning, and their traveling time is not counted as a working time. The other aspect is they work there long hours, and many of them are in a very oppressive situation. Oppressive in the sense it's a very hot place. The country is very hot. The temperature is very high. Usually it goes up to 45 degrees Celsius. Then what happened is their travel time is not counted as their work time. That's one issue. And generally, when we went to different places, we found many of the health and safety rules were followed up. But then there are also areas where there were many people working in a very unsafe environment, unsafe ways. They didn't have that health and safety rules followed. So that's another issue. When it comes to the accommodation, we went to the accommodation site. There were around 8 people put in one room. Obviously, it's a very dark room. The rooms were not very clean. And then in one of the houses, we saw even the bed box moving on the walls. So that's the situation. And in one places, they have the kitchen in that living room itself, but in many places they had a separate kitchens, but then that was shared by more than 16 people, and then rooms were very crowded. Around 8 to 16 people were sharing a room. So you could imagine how bad the situation was. And then imagine they go very early, come at late, and then their bathrooms were horrible. So you could see all the kind of substandard living conditions there. I mean, I'm not claiming that's for everybody, but then people who were little having better positions, who were supervisors, they had little better facilities. But when it comes to the workers, real workers, their situation was quite bad. You know, they were really not having proper accommodation. The third aspect is the kind of payment. It has two aspects. One, when they were recruited back in Nepal or other countries, they were always promised the higher rate of salary. And then when they came back, they came to Qatar, uh, they renewed the agreement, work agreement, and then salary was really reduced. So that's already one aspect, and workers had no say to it because they couldn't do anything about that. Many of them protest, but then they cannot do much, so they have to um, tolerate it. That's the first issue. Second issue is many of them get salaries. I'm not saying not they don't get, but many of them did not get salaries in time. And we found people who were not paid at least for 6 months even. So that's the kind of situation you could find in Qatar. And there is a very little the workers could do in terms of law because there is a very strange law in the country which is called a kafala system. That's the crux of it that makes workers' life very hard. And under that law, what happens is when workers come into the country, their sponsors are the employers. So under that law, they cannot change the employers. And then that means they can, even if they want to change, the employers have to agree on it, which they don't in many cases. I mean, in rare cases, they do agree. That means what happens is they have to endure any kind of work arrangements. If they don't get salary, they cannot go away, they cannot change. If they don't like job, they cannot go out. If they don't like the treatment of the employer, they cannot go out. If they don't like the accommodation provided by the employers, they cannot leave the job and go to another employer. And that means they are forced to work in a situation. So that's kind of a forced labor situation for them. Of course, there are workers who are a bit bold and who cannot tolerate and they run away. If they run away from there and they try to go and find another work, because many of them don't know the law and that they don't know the rules and regulations there. And then when they try to go out and try to find a new job, then they are said to be breaching the contract. And then they are termed as a kind of absconded laborers. And police can arrest them, take to the prison, and finally they go to jail and then face deportation. So that's the kind of thing. So that's the situation. Either you go to the prison or face deportation, or accept the situation the employers impose on you. So that's the kind of situation you have in many places. Again, I'm not claiming this is the overall situation, but then many workers, especially in the smaller subcontractors work, they face that kind of situation. So that's the general. And then the other aspect is, even if they say, okay, I don't want to stay in this country, I'll go back, still they cannot go back because there is something called exit permit, which the employers have to agree on. So they can apply to go back to the country, but then the employers have to say, okay, they can go back, there is no issues with us. So that's the situation. So that means what this whole situation constitutes is a kind of a forced labor. So that's therefore many workers are in the forced labor situation in the country. So that's the aspect I was thinking that very important to address. And Qataris have said they will change the law, they will change the kafala law, and they'll make the exit permit easier. And then even if the keeping of passports of workers are illegal, but still the employers keep the passports of workers. So that means still people cannot go out of the country. Once they come out in the state of Qatar, they have to be there. Either they have to follow the work, or if they run out, they face the prison or deportation, or even if they want to go back, they cannot go back. So that's the kind of situation you call in forced labor situation. You are forced to work in a situation where the workers do not life. That's the other one aspect of it. The third aspect we'll see is that kind of people, many of the workers being denied their rightful compensation for the injury they made, and then many of them have uh, met injuries during their work. They were wounded, and some of them are very severely wounded. And I must be very honest, many of them have received the compensation, but then many have not received the compensation also. So I think that's one aspect. Again, you could see hundreds of them are denied the rightful compensation or the insurance money. I met one of the persons from Nepal who was there for 6 months waiting for the compensation to get. He went to a lawyer. Apparently, lawyer was more loyal to the employer, so he was put back to the prison. So all these complications which workers do not understand. And then later he was provided another lawyer, and that he was still fighting the case, and he was hopeful that he will be getting it. He did not have any money to sustain there. He was getting money from one of his brothers working in Saudi Arabia, and then he was just living there. So that kind of situation you find in Qatar. The third aspect, which is very serious, and I think everybody should be very aware of it, is the death of workers. And all the media, especially media from England, from the BBC, Guardian, and other media have already said that there are a high number of people who are dying in Qatar while they were working. And then I have looked at the data from both the provided by Nepalese government and data available from different researchers, and then my own discussion with the workers there, which is very shocking in a way, because until now, from the announcement of the World Cup, more than 1,000 foreign workers, especially Nepalese, Bangladeshis, and Indians, have died. And then the other aspect there is that when you look at the reason for death, you find in the region given by the government there is the cardiac arrest. And that is a bit surprising, because that has something to do with their insurance, because some of the workers told me, which we need to further investigate, but then the workers have told me that because if the doctors say that somebody died because of cardiac arrest, and that is not taken as a kind of industrial incident or accident, therefore the employers do not have to pay money. So that has something to do with the insurance. So I think that was a ploy to devoid people from getting the insurance, or prevent people from getting insurance. So I think that's another aspect. And then second aspect could be because people work in an oppressive heat. They work in the open, and probably that's also the reason why they have cardiac arrest, if it is there. And then in that case, and I think that relates to the kind of health and safety issue of the work. So I think those are the kind of areas. What really makes the situation worse is because of the legal situation, and they, like Qataris said, they must change the law, which they have not done until now, and then I think they will not do it for some time now. Even if they do it, I think they will still keep this labor control mechanism which is in place, and then they still want to control laborers, and they control their personal lives the way they are doing now. Yeah, that's the situation I was talking about in Qatar. It's if you just look at from a labor standards perspective or from human rights point of view, it's a more forced labor situation, and Qatar is must abolish this kafala system or kafala laws to eradicate that, and they should effectively monitor the factories, working place, and then they should employ more labor inspectors who are um, also thinking about the labor rights. I think those are the issues they need to immediately tackle. Just focusing on foreign countries and then just the recruitment process doesn't help, which they seem to be doing now. So I think that's the kind of labor aspect of the our investigation. And what at this point I would like to say is Qatar is a very rich country and it should not build up any facilities, any based on the slavery or slave-like situation. And I think that's one of the point the whole world is thinking about. I think they should not build their economy based using the slave labor or forced labor or bonded labor, whatever.